Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey that's equal parts strange, alluring, and unexpectedly educational. Picture this. On a quiet canal street in Amsterdam, under the hazy glow of a street lamp, a small, transparent bag glimmers on the pavement. Inside it, a condom labeled Rijksmuseum Special Edition, accompanied by a postcard featuring a provocative nude figure. Local media quickly picked it up with headlines like, "A museum treasure" or "cultural stigma." The story spread like wildfire across social media, sparking heated debates among history buffs and sex culture enthusiasts alike. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the Moonlight and Sleepless television channel, and I will deliver as you wish. And tell me in the comments your city and what time it is now. Now, dim the lights, and as the night stretches on, let's gently step into tonight's journey together. This is a tale about the bizarre, erotic art condom that emerged from the Rijksmuseum's Shadow-tale, where desire, aesthetics, and social taboos converge. Eyewitnesses said that the illustration on the condom's wrapper mirrored a 17th-century erotic painting from the museum's collection. It depicted a hand lightly resting on a woman's shoulder, the fingers lingering in a place both suggestive and controversial, an image so vivid it blurred the line between art and product. Speculation ran rampant. Was this a prank, a marketing stunt, or a deeper commentary? A condom, usually hidden away as a private item, now boldly displayed in a museum exhibit. Dutch media wasted no time tracing the condom incident back through centuries of history. The 17th century was the Dutch Golden Age, time of flourishing trade, wealth, and a vibrant art and scientific scene. Erotic art, too, quietly blossomed in the city's shadows. Engravings, oil paintings, sculptures, and pamphlets all became part of the cultural undercurrent. Historians believe that this underground art wasn't just about pleasure. It also challenged social hierarchies, moral codes, and religious norms. Surprisingly, Dutch erotic art was filled with double meanings, symbols, and playful puns, skillfully evading censors while delighting bourgeois patrons. And the story of condoms is no less complicated. Today, we see them as symbols of hygiene and sexual health, but in the 17th century, they were shrouded in shame and secrecy. Archaeologists once unearthed an early example of a condom made from sheep intestines in the old town of Amsterdam, a fragile, decaying relic that offered a tantalizing glimpse into that era's complicated views on sexuality. It revealed a society torn between desire and repression, yearning for freedom, yet bound by morality and religious doctrine. This discovery has become one of the most sought-after artifacts for modern curators, as it captures the period's authentic approach to human desire. In the interplay of darkness and history, that Rijksmuseum Special Edition condom seems to be a contemporary portal into the past. It's both a historical echo and a modern challenge to our boundaries of art and desire. Even today, scholars fiercely debate the meaning of this blend of erotic art and condoms. Is it satire, deconstruction, a tongue-in-cheek artistic gesture? The answer remains elusive. In the chapters to come, we'll unravel this entangled tale of erotic art and condoms, guiding you through hidden alleys of history and art. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back to 17th century Amsterdam, where, under the glow of lanterns, artists and merchants painted their era's secret desires in shades of ambiguity. That night in Amsterdam was no ordinary evening. It was a time when curiosity met history, and where every cobblestone seemed to whisper the past. As we lean into this story, let's trace the origins of a small yet significant artifact that would eventually find its way into the Rijksmuseum's most controversial exhibit, the condom. Long before it became a household item, the condom's journey began as an unlikely hero in the fight against disease and unwanted pregnancy. Historians still debate when exactly the first condom appeared, but the earliest documented references date back to ancient civilizations, perhaps even as far as Egypt, where linen sheaths may have been used for ceremonial or protective purposes. Yet it wasn't until the 16th and 17th centuries in Europe that condoms began to emerge as objects of both curiosity and controversy. In the Netherlands, trade and travel brought not just spices and silks, but also knowledge of exotic medical practices. Dutch traders returning from Asia and Africa recounted stories of local customs for disease prevention, some involving natural materials like animal intestines or fish bladders. The Dutch, known for their pragmatism and openness to innovation, began experimenting with these ideas. An often cited example is the use of sheep gut, or linen, soaked in chemicals, a method believed to offer protection against the dreaded syphilis that swept across Europe like wildfire during the Renaissance. In Amsterdam's portside taverns and merchant homes, such makeshift barriers were whispered about, sold discreetly in back rooms, and even advertised, though in coded language, in underground pamphlets. It was a hush-hush trade that revealed the complicated dance between desire and diseasia dance that continues to fascinate historians. Imagine a cramped room lit by a single flickering candle, a merchant's apprentice rolling out a length of sheep intestine on a wooden table, then carefully knotting one end before boiling it to soften the texture. It was an act at once practical and symbolic, a small rebellion against the dangers of intimacy in an era when medicine lagged behind human desire. And yet, even this simple object was a source of shame. Decency dictated that such items remain hidden away, even though they played a crucial role in the private lives of the city's inhabitants. As Amsterdam's prosperity grew, so did its appetite for knowledge. Physicians and moralists alike debated the virtues and dangers of condoms, sometimes in the same breath. Some argued they were a necessary evil and unsightly yet vital means of controlling disease. Others saw them as a gateway to moral decay. History scholars still argue, wrote one Dutch academic, whether condoms were more scandalous for what they represented or for how they were used. The debate continues today, with some historians contending that condoms empowered women by offering some measure of control over their bodies, while others claim they were tools of patriarchal dominance. The Rijksmuseum's archives contain a fascinating letter from a 17th-century physician who described his failed attempts to convince the local magistrates to legalize the sale of condoms. He argued that it was better to manage human weakness than to pretend it does not exist. His plea fell on deaf ears at the time, but it left behind a tantalizing historical thread that museum curators would later follow into the hidden corners of their collection. It's in this intersection between medicine, morality, and commerce that the condom found its place in Dutch history. And when that modern-day special edition condom, with its erotic artwork, appeared on the street in Amsterdam centuries later, it was as if the city's long-buried secrets had surfaced once more. The packaging itself seemed to wink at history, reminding us that even the most intimate items can reveal the deepest truths about who we are and who we were. So, as we move forward, remember that every artifact holds a story some as mundane as sheep intestines, others as grand as the moral battles waged in candlelit rooms. And somewhere between them lies the truth, waiting for us to uncover it. In the 17th century, the Dutch Republic witnessed an explosion of artistic creativity unlike any other. As trade routes expanded and wealth poured into Amsterdam's coffers, painters, engravers, and sculptors flocked to the city, eager to capture its spirit. It was an age of Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Frans Hals when art reflected the growing confidence and curiosity of a burgeoning middle class. But amidst the portraits of merchants and landscapes of tulip fields, there thrived a subgenre that few dared to speak of openly: erotic art. This hidden world is what historians call the golden age of erotic art. And it wasn't confined to private collections. It seeped into the margins of everyday life. A quick glance at an innocuous still life might reveal a sly wink-appealed lemon symbolizing the fleeting sweetness of desire, or a ripe fig hinting at hidden passions. These details, so easily missed, were deliberate choices by artists eager to challenge the boundaries of respectability. It was an art of innuendo and coded language. Imagine a painter's workshop near the Prinsengracht, where the smell of oil paint mixed with the aroma of imported spices. Apprentices scurried about, grinding pigments, while their master labored over a canvas depicting an elegant lady. To the casual observer, it was just another portrait. But look closer. Perhaps her gaze lingered a second too long on the viewer, or a delicately embroidered curtain in the background parted just enough to suggest something more. These subtle provocations delighted the merchants who commissioned them, allowing them to indulge in a bit of risque amusement while maintaining a veneer of respectability. One particularly fascinating example comes from a little-known artist named Dirk van Baburen, whose The Procuress shocked and intrigued his contemporaries. The painting shows a young woman with a lutea, a traditional symbol of sensuality, leaning suggestively toward a man who offers her a coin. Was it a cautionary tale or an invitation to temptation? Historians still debate whether Baburen intended to critique Amsterdam's thriving sex trade or simply cater to wealthy clients' tastes. Either way, it captured the era's fascination with the blurry lines between desire and commerce. This interplay of art and eroticism also thrived in the realm of printmaking. Amsterdam's bustling print shops churned out images that ranged from religious iconography to the downright bawdy. A 1640s etching titled The Satyricon of the Dutch Merchant featured a series of comic erotic scenes, satirizing both the hypocrisy of moralists and the secret desires of the bourgeoisie. Collectors would buy these prints, hide them in drawers, and bring them out only for trusted friends after a few drinks. Such works remind us that art was not always confined to gilded frames. It could be folded, hidden, and shared in whispers. Yet even during this golden age, there were tensions. The Dutch Reformed Church disapproved of such artworks, viewing them as dangerous distractions from spiritual life. Civic authorities occasionally cracked down on printers and artists, though enforcement was inconsistent at best. Some artists, like Rembrandt himself, flirted with the edges of erotic artist etchings of bathers and nudes, challenged notions of decency and piety. Historians still argue, one art scholar recently noted, whether Rembrandt's erotic etchings were personal explorations or acts of quiet rebellion. The lines remain blurred, much like the images themselves. In Rijksmuseum's archives, curators discovered letters from traders who smuggled erotic prints into Amsterdam from France and Italy. These prints, many now fragile and faded, carefully preserved in the museum's storage rooms. Some still bear the marks of hurried handling, creases from being tucked away quickly when a knock came at the door. Each fold tells a story of curiosity and caution, a testament to how desire found its way into even the most polite drawing rooms. This chapter of the Golden Age reveals a side of history often left out of textbooks. Erotic art in 17th-century Amsterdam wasn't merely titillation, it was a mirror reflecting the hopes, fears, and contradictions of an entire society. As we continue our journey, keep in mind that every painting, every print, every faint pencil sketch holds secrets waiting to be discovered. If Amsterdam's Golden Age taught us anything, it's that freedom and repression often danced hand in hand. In this chapter, we drift into the delicate tension that defined the Netherlands during this era balancing act between openness and restraint, between the pleasures of the flesh and the dictates of faith. It was an age where liberty thrived, yet moral boundaries were carefully guarded. A time when the lines between acceptance and taboo blurred like reflections on the city's shimmering canals. The Dutch Republic prided itself on a certain religious tolerance compared to its European neighbors. In a time when Catholic Spain and Protestant England burned heretics at the stake, Amsterdam's merchants and artisans boasted that their city was a refuge for Allah, at least in theory. Sephardic Jews fleeing the Inquisition found a new home here, and French Huguenots brought their craftsmanship and trade. Yet even in this liberal environment, sexuality was a more complicated matter. Behind closed doors, erotic art found a place to flourish. The paintings, etchings, and small sculptures we explored, earlier depicting lovers, mythological seductions, and tantalizing allegories, were purchased by wealthy collectors who saw them as symbols of culture and sophistication. But step outside those private salons, and you'd find a different tone altogether. Ministers thundered from pulpits about moral decay, and pamphlets denounced the corruption of the senses. The same merchant who proudly displayed an erotic print in his study might blush and hide it if the pastor came to visit. One letter found in the Rijksmuseum's archives tells of a city magistrate's daughter who was discovered with a small painting showing a reclining Venus, her gaze meeting the viewers with a daring smile. The painting itself was neither explicit nor graphic by today's standards, but it was enough to ignite a scandal that rippled through the household and threatened her father's reputation. Historians still argue, wrote a researcher in a recent exhibit guide, whether such incidents were isolated cases or reflected a broader anxiety in Dutch society about the erosion of moral authority. It's a debate that refuses to die. Even as erotic art winked from behind locked doors, the production and sale of condoms became a secretive yet vital business. Officially frowned upon, these items were nonetheless essential for those navigating the pleasures and dangers of city life. Records from the period show that condoms were sold discreetly in apothecaries' back rooms or by traveling merchants who spoke in hushed tones about protection and personal hygiene. The line between necessity and vice was thin too. Thin, some believed. In one account, a merchant was fined for selling items contrary to decency after a rival reported him to the authorities. His defense that he was protecting the public from disease fell on deaf ears. Instead, he was forced to publicly apologize, a punishment that seemed designed to reinforce the line between public virtue and private vice. And yet, As one museum curator observed in a recent interview, this punishment did little to stem the tide of demand. People always found ways to obtain what they needed, no matter what the moralist said. This tension between condemnation and curiosity created a uniquely Dutch dynamic, one that allowed erotic art and condoms to exist, even thrive, in the shadows, while maintaining an official posture of propriety. It's a dynamic that continues to intrigue scholars and visitors alike. Some believe this very tension gave rise to the ingenuity that characterized Amsterdam's golden age, the willingness to explore new ideas while carefully managing appearances. As we pause here, remember that history is rarely black and white. It's in these gray areas that we find the most human stories, the ones that remind us that desire, shame, curiosity, and creativity are all part of the same tapestry. Tonight, as the night deepens and the candlelight grows softer, let's hold that tension in our minds, knowing that every moral boundary is also an invitation to question and to understand. Amsterdam's Rijksmuseum stands today as a beacon of art and culture. Its grand galleries filled with masterpieces that draw visitors from every corner of the globe. But tucked away in its archives and behind its polished walls lies a lesser-known collection, a trove of erotic art that whispers stories of passion, controversy, and the contradictions of history. Tonight, we drift into the heart of this collection to explore the museum's mysterious, erotic artand, how it came to house such intimate relics. The Rijksmuseum was founded in 1800 with a mission to preserve Dutch heritage and celebrate the nation's artistic achievements. From Rembrandt's The Night Watch to Vermeer's quiet domestic scenes, the museum became a temple to the golden age of painting. But even as it celebrated grandeur and heroism, the Rijksmuseum also acquired works that many considered too private, too provocative, or too scandalous to display in the main halls. In a quiet storage room, its door, marked only by a number curators, keep a special collection of erotic prints, drawings, and small sculptures. Most date from the 17th century, though a few modern pieces have found their way in, sparking debates over what belongs in a national museum. Some are explicit, others subtle, but all share a fascination with the human body and its pleasures. These pieces were often created by artists who also painted religious scenes or formal portraits, a reminder that desire and respectability often shared the same brush. One particularly intriguing artifact is a small, hand-colored etching of a couple intertwined in a passionate embrace, their faces half hidden in shadows. The artist's signature is almost illegible, suggesting a deliberate effort to avoid censure. According to the museum's records, it was seized from a private estate in the 19th century and quietly transferred to the museum's archives. Historians still debate, notes a recent exhibit label, whether the piece was originally intended as an artwork for private enjoyment or as a satirical commentary on moral hypocrisy. Its ambiguity continues to fascinate scholars. Even more fascinating is a small wooden box found alongside the print, containing what appeared to be an early prototype of a condom made from animal intestine and carefully rolled with waxed string. Though fragile and yellowed with age, it's a testament to the resourcefulness of people in the 17th century, seeking protection in an era when disease lurked at every street corner. When curators discovered this artifact, they were astonished to find it packaged alongside erotic art. Was it a deliberate pairing, a merchant's secret stash, or simply the accidental mixing of two taboo subjects? no one can say for sure. Rijksmuseum's curators have long wrestled with the question of whether to display these items publicly. Some argued that to understand Dutch history fully, one must embrace its shadows as well as its light. Others feared that showcasing erotic art would overshadow the museum's educational mission. The debate reached a peak during the 1980s when a small but vocal group of historians and activists campaigned to bring these works into the open, arguing that they offered invaluable insights into the human condition. A 1,987 internal memo revealed that the museum director worried about offending the moral sensibilities of our visitors. To this day, the museum handles these pieces with caution. Walking through the museum's corridors today, most visitors would never guess that behind a locked door lies a collection that challenges our notions of decency and art. It's a reminder that every museum is a living conversation between the past and the present, between what we choose to celebrate and what we choose to hide. And so, the Rijksmuseum's erotic collection waits patiently in the shadows, its stories ready to emerge for those willing to look beyond the polished marble floors and gilded frames. As we continue, let's remember that even the grandest museums are built on human choices: what to display, what to conceal, and what to let time quietly erase. And sometimes, those choices tell us as much about ourselves as they do about the past. If art is a mirror of its time, then erotic art in the Rijksmuseum offers a particularly revealing reflection that shows us how Dutch society once navigated the complexities of sexuality, relationships, and gender roles. Tonight, let's slip into that reflection and discover how the erotic art in the museum's hidden collection reveals not just bodies, but the very heart of a society grappling with desire and decorum. In 17th-century Amsterdam, sex was both a private matter and a public curiosity. The city's reputation as a mercantile hub attracted people from across Europe, bringing with them new ideas, exotic goods, and diverse cultural practices. Amid this cosmopolitan swirl, gender roles and expectations were constantly negotiated. Paintings and prints depicting lovers, courtesans, and even mythological seductions served as a kind of visual conversation about these roles, often hinting at the tensions between male desire and female agency. One small but striking painting in the museum's archives shows a woman reclining on a sumptuous bed, her gaze directed boldly at the viewer, her hand resting near a partially drawn curtain. Scholars have long debated its meaning. Was she a courtesan, offering herself to a client, or a wife reclaiming her own pleasure? Historians still argue, one curator notes, whether the artist intended her as a figure of empowerment or simply as an object of desire. That single detail, the way her eyes meet ours, complicates any simple answer. What's fascinating is how these works often reveal the double standards of the time. In many prints and etchings, male figures are depicted as worldly travelers or successful merchants, their sexual escapades portrayed as a sign of virility and adventure. Women, by contrast, are shown in more ambiguous lights, sometimes as temptresses, sometimes as victims, and sometimes as symbols of domestic virtue. These contradictions mirrored the expectations placed upon women in real life, expected to be both virtuous and alluring, chaste yet accommodating. It was a tightrope walk that artists both reflected and, at times, subverted. One etching in particular captures this tension vividly. A man sits at a table, leering at a barmaid who is pouring wine. His hand reaches out casual, almost dismissive as if to claim her as part of the service. The barmaid, however, looks back at him with a half smile that could be read as complicity, defiance, or resignation. That ambiguity is precisely what makes these works so compelling. They force us to confront our own assumptions about consent, power, and desire. But it wasn't just the artists who shaped these images. The patrons had a hand in them too. Wealthy merchants often commissioned erotic pieces to amuse their friends or to show off their sophistication. Sometimes, these commissions came with very specific instructions about how women should be depicted, suggesting that art wasn't just a reflection of society's views on gender, but also a tool for shaping them. And then there's the curious case of the condoms that sometimes accompanied these artworks. Preserved alongside prints and paintings, they suggest that these items weren't always viewed purely as medical devices. For some, they were a way to navigate the pleasures that these artworks both hinted at and celebrated. A small museum note found alongside one such artifact reads, "A curious addition, was it for display or use?" That question hangs in the air like a secret, reminding us that art and life have always been more entangled than we care to admit. As we drift further into the Rijksmuseum's hidden chambers, let's hold on to this idea. Erotic art was never just about the act itself. It was and remains a lens into the relationships, expectations, and contradictions that shape how we think about desire. Every brushstroke and etching line carries with it the fingerprints of a society both drawn to and afraid of its own passions. Every artist leaves behind a signature, but in the world of erotic art, signatures often came hidden tucked into corners, disguised as symbols, or omitted entirely. Tonight, let's wander through the workshops of Amsterdam's artists to uncover the secrets hidden in their brushstrokes, the coded messages they wove into their erotic creations, and the risks they took to challenge or exploit the boundaries of desire. Imagine a small attic studio near the Single Canal. A single candle burns low as the artist works in silence, carefully mixing pigments from lapis lazuli and ochre. His canvas reveals the outline of a woman's face, but it's the details that matter. The way her hair curls around her shoulder, the barely visible line of a necklace disappearing beneath the fabric. To the untrained eye, it's a portrait like any other. But those in the know recognize the subtle symbolism: a necklace representing a lover's gift, the parted lips hinting at sensual invitation. In this world, artists became masters of suggestion, finding ways to please patrons while avoiding the heavy hand of censorship. One painting, now preserved in the Rijksmuseum's archives, shows a seemingly innocent domestic scene: a woman pouring milk into a bowl while a man stands behind her, hand resting on her shoulder. But look closer, and the gesture of his fingers takes on a more intimate meaning. His thumb pressing gently at the base of her neck, just above the lace of her bodice. Historians have long debated whether this was a depiction of marital affection or a coded commentary on power dynamics between men and women. Scholars still argue. One curator noted recently whether the artist intended a moral critique or simply a provocative detail to amuse his patron. That question, like so many in the world of erotic art, remains deliciously open. The symbolism didn't stop at gestures. Everyday objects became carriers of hidden meanings. A peeled lemon on a table suggested the bittersweet nature of love. A bird in a cage alluded to captivity or, perhaps, to the constraints of marriage. A dog under the table hinted at loyalty or desire, depending on the context. These symbols allowed artists to layer meaning into their work, crafting images that could be interpreted differently depending on the viewer's own experiences and desires. It was a game of cat and mouse between artist, patron, and audience, a game that continues to fascinate historians today. For the artists themselves, painting erotic scenes was both a risk and an opportunity. On one hand, commissions from wealthy patrons could bring in substantial income. On the other, a misstep in image deemed too explicit or too subversive could ruin a career. That's why many artists chose to sign only their initials or to let apprentices or workshop assistants handle the more risque details. This practice allowed them to maintain plausible deniability if the authorities came knocking. One particularly interesting case involves an artist known only as BV, believed to be a minor figure in Rembrandt's circle, who left behind a series of etchings that blended biblical stories with surprisingly frank depictions of intimacy. Was he critiquing the church, or simply catering to a market eager for novelty? The Rijksmuseum's files include letters from art dealers, debating whether to buy his works, weighing the risk of scandal against the potential profits. It's a reminder that art wasand is always entangled with commerce. Even today, as visitors walk through the Rijksmuseum's vast halls, most will never know about these hidden treasures. Locked in climate-controlled drawers, they wait for the occasional exhibition or scholarly visit, their secrets safe from casual eyes. But for those who dare to look closely, each brushstroke, each delicate etching offers a tantalizing glimpse into a world where art and desire met in a silent but powerful dance. So tonight, as the candle burns low and the shadows grow deeper, let's remember that artists have always found ways to express what words alone could not. In their brushstrokes, in their symbols, and in their silences, they left us clues to the most private corners of the human heart, clues that still wait patiently for us to decode. Throughout the 17th century, the condom remained a quiet, often hidden presence in the daily lives of Amsterdam citizens. It was a small object with a big secret, both an emblem of caution and a tool of rebellion. But how did this private item make the leap from discreet apothecary shelves to the bright lights of the Rijksmuseum's exhibits? Tonight, let's trace the unlikely journey of the condom's identity, how it went from whispered necessity to a curious historical artifact displayed alongside erotic art. Imagine for a moment the bustling port of Amsterdam at the height of its trading power. Sailors, merchants, and travelers from every corner of the world filled the docks and taverns. Disease, especially syphilis, lurked in every shadow. Medical pamphlets circulated warning of the pox, and among the recommended preventatives was the humble condom. Early versions were made from animal membranous sheep. Gut was most common washed, stretched, and sometimes dipped in oils or chemicals to reduce disease risk. They were far from perfect, but they represented a small measure of control in a world where desire and danger went hand in hand. For centuries, these items were sold quietly, often under euphemisms like French letters or protective sheaths. Apothecaries kept them in locked drawers, away from the prying eyes of moralists and clergy. A merchant might slip a small packet into his coat pocket after a hushed exchange with a pharmacist, hoping to avoid scandal. A young couple might share a laugh over a pamphlet that advertised discreet protection, a code understood by all but acknowledged by none. So how did the condom become an exhibit in a national museum? The answer lies in the changing attitudes of historians and curators, who began to view everyday objects, especially those tied to sex and intimacies, essential pieces of the human story. In the mid-20th century, a wave of social history swept through European museums, challenging the idea that only grand paintings and royal artifacts belonged in the halls of national culture. Suddenly, the everyday lives of ordinary people, complete with their contradictions and taboos, became worthy of study. In the Rijksmuseum's archives, a curator's handwritten note from the 1960s captures this shift perfectly. It is no longer enough to display the glory of the nation. We must also illuminate its shadows. This philosophy opened the door for items like the condom to be seen, not as curiosities, but as vital links to the past. It became a way to understand not just disease prevention, but also shifting attitudes toward sexuality, morality, and even gender. Yet bringing condoms into the public eye wasn't without controversy. In the 1980s, when the museum considered a small exhibit on sexual health in the 17th century, some critics accused it of sensationalism. Letters poured in, both supportive and outraged, some praising the museum for tackling difficult subjects, others decrying it as indecent. Historians still argue one exhibit guide notes whether the museum was educating the public or indulging in prurient curiosity. That tension in many ways reflects the same debates that surrounded condoms in their earliest days. Today, the Rijksmuseum occasionally brings out these historical condoms for special exhibits, pairing them with the erotic art that once shared the same private spaces. Displayed together, they create a conversation between art and artifact, desire and disease, pleasure and prudence. Some visitors find it amusing, others uncomfortable, but no one leaves indifferent. And so, the humble condomance, a hidden object, tucked into drawers and coat pockets now, stands in a glass case, a testament to the tangled relationship between sexuality and society. It reminds us that every object, no matter how small, carries stories waiting to be told. As we move on, let's remember that history's most revealing moments often come not from the grand gestures, but from the smallest items and etching's hidden signature, a lover's glance, or a simple sheath meant to protect. In their quiet resilience, these objects challenge us to look closer, to see not just the surface, but the humanity within. When the Rijksmuseum finally decided to bring its hidden erotic treasures to light, it sparked an uproar that rippled far beyond the museum's marble halls. The decision to display a selection of erotic prints, provocative paintings, and even historical condoms was both an artistic and a cultural gambolion that tested the boundaries of decency, scholarship, and public curiosity. Tonight, let's step into that moment of controversy and see how an exhibition that was meant to illuminate history instead ignited debate that still echoes today. It began with a simple idea: to explore the relationship between art and intimacy in the Dutch Golden Age. Curators argued that to truly understand Amsterdam's 17th-century society, one had to confront its hidden corners where desire, commerce, and social norms intertwined. They envisioned a small but carefully curated exhibition that would bring together erotic prints, private sketches, and even a few artifacts like the famous Rijksmuseum Special Edition condom items that had long been kept in the museum's storage rooms, wrapped in tissue paper and caution. From the beginning, the plan was controversial. Some staff worried that featuring explicit images might overshadow the museum's educational mission. Others believed it was time to acknowledge that sexuality was as much a part of history as trade, politics, or religion. In a handwritten note from the planning committee, one curator wrote, "We must be brave enough to show how desire shaped our ancestors' lives. History cannot be censored." That conviction, however, soon collided with the realities of public opinion. When the exhibit opened, the reaction was immediate. Newspapers splashed headlines like Rijksmuseum or Red Light Museum, and "Is this art or obscenity?" Local politicians weighed in, some praising the museum's honesty, others condemning it as a betrayal of public trust. A group of parents filed a complaint, claiming that the museum had become a playground for the indecent. One academic commentator dryly noted that historians still argue whether the controversy stemmed from genuine moral outrage or from the discomfort of seeing private desires laid bare. Indeed, that question remains unresolved. Amid the public debate, museum staff found themselves at the center of a media storm. Some docents reported receiving angry phone calls, while others noted an uptick in visitor curiosity. Attendance spiked as curious locals and tourists alike lined up to see the exhibit that had everyone talking. A few visitors left notes in the guest book, some praising the museum for its bravery, others demanding that the offending pieces be removed. The curators, meanwhile, scrambled to balance accessibility with sensitivity, placing small warning signs next to the more explicit works, and offering visitors the choice to skip certain sections. Inside the exhibition, the atmosphere was electric. In one gallery, an etching by a 17th-century artist depicted a courtesan offering a coy smile to a merchant, her gown slipping provocatively off her shoulder. In another, a carefully preserved condom with age lay beside a set of pamphlets extolling the virtues of discretion and caution. Visitors lingered, reading the captions, whispering to each other, pointing at the details they'd never noticed before. It was a reminder that history is rarely as polite or straightforward as the textbooks suggest. And yet, amid the controversy, something profound happened. Many visitors reported that seeing these works made them feel closer to the people of the past sailors who loved and feared, merchants who hid their desires behind velvet curtains, artists who dared to capture forbidden moments on canvas. One visitor wrote in the guest book, "I feel like I've met the real Amsterdam, not just the city of canals and tulips." That sentiment, curators later reflected, was the true purpose of the exhibit. As the exhibit drew to a close, the debate faded, but the questions it raised lingered. Should museums challenge us with uncomfortable truths, or should they protect us from the messiness of human nature? The Rijksmuseum's experience offered no easy answers, only a reminder that every artifact has the power to disturb, delight, and awaken something deep inside us. So tonight, as we leave the gallery behind, let's carry with us the idea that history is more than dates and deeds. A tapestry woven from desire, scandal, and the questions we're still afraid to ask. Walking through the Rijksmuseum's vast halls, it's easy to get lost in the grandeur of the Golden Age Rembrandt's proud merchants, Vermeer's sunlit rooms, the silent, still lifes of flowers and fruit. But hidden within these celebrated galleries lies another kind of story, one that doesn't shout from the canvas, but instead lingers in the shadows. A story of subtle gestures, coded messages, and the profound silence that museums sometimes cultivate to shield their visitors from discomfort. Tonight, let's slip into that silence and discover how the Rijksmuseum has learned to present its more risque treasures without ever quite naming them. In a corner of the museum, rarely visited by the casual tourist, a small wooden door leads to a climate-controlled storage room. Here, nestled in drawers and archival boxes, the erotic prints, explicit etchings, and curious artifacts of the 17th century lie waiting. These items are not hidden out of shame alone, but also because they are delicate, requiring special preservation. Yet their physical fragility mirrors the cultural fragility of the conversations they provoke. How do we talk about sex, desire, and taboo without overshadowing the art itself? For decades, museum curators wrestled with this dilemma. When preparing to display these items 7 in limited exhibitions, they agonized over the wording of labels. Should they describe the content plainly? Should they hint but not show? One curator's notebook from the 1990s reveals the tension. To be historically accurate is to risk scandal. To be discreet is to risk dishonesty. That tightrope has defined the museum's relationship with its erotic collections ever since. One memorable example involves a small etching of a nude woman reclining on a couch, a delicately drawn handmaid in the background holding a basin of water. The image, though tasteful, clearly suggests an intimate encounter, a theme that challenged curators to balance historical truth with modern sensibilities. The label, written after much debate, reads, "A depiction of personal hygiene, typical of domestic life in the 17th century." It's a carefully chosen phrase, one that acknowledges the context but leaves much unsaid. This strategy, showing but not telling, reflects a larger cultural habit of dealing with desire. In the tolerant yet restrained society of the Dutch Golden Age, erotic art existed at the margins, both celebrated and suppressed. It was sold discreetly, hidden behind household screens, or kept in private albums shared only with close friends. Today, that same spirit lingers in the museum's approach. Display the object, but let the viewer decide how far they wish to look. Visitors who stumble upon these exhibits often find themselves whispering, as if entering a confessional. A student sketching in the gallery might glance nervously at a neighbor's reaction. A parent, reading a label to their child, might pause mid-sentence, eyes darting to the text for reassurance. It's a dance between curiosity and caution that unfolds in real time, echoing the tension that has always surrounded erotic art in polite society. Historians still debate whether this caution is an act of respect or a quiet form of censorship. Some argue that by softening the edges of the past, museums deny us a full understanding of human history, the messy, contradictory parts that make us who we are. Others contend that a museum's role is to educate without shocking, to guide visitors gently rather than force them into uncomfortable confrontations. The Rijksmuseum's own staff remain divided, their discussions captured in memos and meeting notes tucked away like the artifacts themselves. And yet, amid the careful wording and whispered questions, a kind of intimacy emerges. The silence becomes an invitation, a space where visitors can fill in the blanks with their own stories, their own questions, their own curiosities. It's a reminder that every object in a museum carries more than one meaning, and that the act of interpretation is itself a deeply personal journey. So tonight, as we leave the hushed corridors and the guarded labels, let's remember that sometimes history speaks loudest, not in what it says, but in what it leaves unsaid. In that silence, we find the echoes of every unspoken desire, every hidden truth, and every curiosity that refuses to fade. Throughout history, few objects have been as simultaneously useful and reviled as the condom. It's a small item that carries the weight of centuries of conflicting beliefs: morality versus practicality, pleasure versus prudence, freedom versus fear. Tonight, let's dive into the fascinating journey of the condom's social identity, from a hushed secret to a symbol of modern science and the stubborn shadows of stigma that persist even today. In the 17th century, the very notion of a condom was enough to cause scandal. Though sold discreetly in apothecaries and by traveling merchants, they were whispered about as French letters or protective sheaths, never named directly in polite conversation. For some, they represented a necessary defense against disease, particularly syphilis, which ravaged Europe in waves. For others, they were a moral failing, a tool that encouraged sin by separating sex from its supposed consequence, childbearing. An Amsterdam doctor's private notes, preserved in the Rijksmuseum's archives, capture this tension perfectly. He wrote of patients so desperate to avoid the pox that they would accept any device, no matter how distasteful. Yet in the same paragraph, he lamented that these same patients saw the condom as a shameful indulgence, a sign that they had yielded to temptation. Historians still argue, a museum label notes, whether medical authorities truly believed in the condom's effectiveness, or whether they simply saw it as a convenient scapegoat for society's growing sexual freedoms. It's a debate that echoes even now. As centuries passed, the stigma around condoms only deepened. In the Victorian era, moralists decried them as instruments of vice. Laws in some countries even banned their advertisement, pushing them further into the shadows. In Amsterdam, however, the city's pragmatic streak occasionally won out. Some merchants risked fines and social scorn to sell them under the counter, catering to a demand that would not be denied. One merchant's ledger from the 1800s reveals a steady trickle of purchases anonymously recorded under code names and initials, evidence that desire, disease, and discretion were always tangled together. With the dawn of the 20th century, medical science began to reclaim the condom as a legitimate tool for public health. Campaigns against sexually transmitted diseases, especially during World War I, gave the condom a new respectability in some circles. Amsterdam's health officials quietly supported its use among soldiers and sailors who faced the twin threats of temptation and infection in the city's vibrant portside districts. Yet even then, old prejudices lingered. Advertisements often used euphemisms like hygienic devices or marriage aids, avoiding any direct mention of sex. The transformation of the condom from taboo object to museum artifact represents a cultural shift as significant as any painting or sculpture. By the time the Rijksmuseum began to seriously consider its place in Dutch history, the condom had already started its journey from whispered secret to subject of academic study. Some curators argued that it offered an unmatched window into the tensions of modern lifehouse societies wrestle with sexuality, disease, and moral codes. Others feared that even a single display case might trivialize or sensationalize an object that still carried a heavy social burden. Today, the museum's cautious yet determined inclusion of historical condoms alongside erotic art stands as a quiet act of defiance. It challenges visitors to confront their own biases and to recognize that even the most private items can shape the course of history. A small sign in the museum's storage area says it best: objects of shame are often the ones that reveal the most. And so, as we reflect on this complex artifact, a simple sheath made from the gut of a sheep, or a modern latex ringlets, remember that the condom's journey is far from over. It still carries echoes of stigma, but also of resilience and defiance. In its fragile form lies a powerful reminder that human sexuality has always been both a private act and a public story, one that continues to unfold in every whispered conversation and every carefully worded museum label. If you ever find yourself in the Rijksmuseum's labyrinthine storage rooms, you might be surprised at the diversity of reactions these erotic treasures provoke. Some visitors lean in, eyes wide with fascination, while others avert their gaze, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. This spectrum of responses mirrors a larger truth. Erotic art has always been a mirror reflecting not just desire, but society's ever-shifting attitudes about what is acceptable, what is scandalous, and what is worth preserving. Tonight, let's explore the many faces of erotic artho. It challenges us to see ourselves and the world around us through new and sometimes uncomfortable eyes. For the 17th century Dutch, erotic art was more than a private amusement. It was also a source of tension between personal liberty and communal values. Wealthy patrons might display a small etching in their study, inviting select guests to share in the amusement. Meanwhile, religious authorities warned that such images could corrupt the soul and undermine the moral fabric of society. Even today, historians can't fully agree on where erotic art sat on the spectrum between decadent vice and legitimate cultural expression. Scholars still debate. One museum guide notes, whether these works were secret confessions of desire or subtle acts of rebellion against social norms. One painting in the Rijksmuseum's hidden collection shows a couple in a lush garden, their bodies partially concealed by foliage. The brushstrokes are delicate, almost impressionistic, leaving much to the imagination. Depending on the viewer's perspective, the image might suggest romantic love, marital intimacy, or even an illicit affair. That ambiguity was often intentional a way for artists to appeal to a broad range of patrons while avoiding explicit condemnation. A merchant might see a celebration of fertility, while a moralist might see a cautionary tale of temptation. The art itself refuses to settle into a single meaning, inviting viewers to bring their own stories to the canvas. This multiplicity of meanings is part of what makes erotic art so enduring and so controversial. Some modern visitors find it liberating to see that people in the past wrestled with the same questions about sex, power, and desire that we do today. Others find it unsettling to confront the explicitness of some images, especially in a museum that also houses religious altarpieces and portraits of noble families. One visitor's comment in the museum's guest book captures this tension. "I came for Rembrandt, but I left thinking about what I'd rather not talk about." That unease is, in a way, the point. Erotic art forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that polite society prefers to keep hidden. Curators at the Rijksmuseum have tried to embrace this complexity, designing exhibits that allow visitors to choose their own level of engagement. Small warning signs mark the entrance to more explicit sections, giving each guest the option to continue or turn away. Some visitors appreciate the discretion, others criticize it as a form of modern-day prudishness that echoes the very taboos the art once challenged. The museum's own staff continue to debate how best to navigate these tensions, with one curator recently remarking, It's impossible to please everyone, but maybe that's the point. Art is supposed to provoke. This conversation extends beyond the museum walls, of course. In academia, scholars continue to explore how erotic art shapesand is shaped by ideas of gender, class, and power. Some argue that these images empowered women by giving them a voice, however coded, in a male-dominated world. Others contend that they reinforced patriarchal fantasies, reducing women to objects of desire. The truth is likely somewhere in between, reflection of the messy realities of history. As we leave this chapter behind, let's hold on to the idea that erotic art is never just about sex. It's about who we are, what we value, and how we navigate the boundaries between private pleasure and public life. Every brushstroke, every etching line, every carefully hidden detail is a reminder that art and history rarely fits into neat categories. So tonight, let's keep our eyes and minds open, knowing that sometimes the most challenging images are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. The erotic art preserved within the Rijksmuseum's archives is more than an aesthetic curiosity. It is a window into the deepest corners of the human heart. Each brushstroke, each etching, each carefully chosen detail tells a story of longing, temptation, tenderness, and rebellion. Tonight, let's walk hand in hand with these artworks and the artists who created them, to explore how love, lust, and hidden desires were woven into the very fabric of their lives and ours. Imagine an artist hunched over his canvas in the dim glow of a single candle, the smell of linseed oil filling the room. Outside, Amsterdam's canals gleam under the moonlight, the water carrying whispers of lovers and secrets alike. Inside, his brush dips into a swirl of paint ochre, carmine, ivory, and, with each stroke, he captures a moment that might never be spoken aloud. A woman's parted lips, a man's outstretched hand, a body half-shadowed in the soft glow of a fireplace. These details breathe life into the canvas, transforming it from pigment to passion. Some artists used mythological stories as a safe vehicle for their explorations of desire. In one etching stored deep within the museum's archives, Venus reclines with Mars, a sly smile playing at the corner of her lips. To some, this was simply a mythological tableau scene lifted from Roman poetry. To others, it was a barely veiled celebration of human pleasure. Historians still debate. One curator wrote in her notes, whether these works were a clever way to navigate censorship or a genuine celebration of erotic love. That debate continues as scholars search for the line between myth and confession. In letters preserved by the museum, we catch glimpses of the artist's own complicated lives. One painter wrote to his patron of his struggle to balance religious devotion with the irresistible pull of the human form. God made us in his image, yet the flesh yearns to defy him. Another artist, facing financial ruin, confessed that erotic commissions were often the only way to keep his workshop open. They do not understand, he lamented, that a painter must eat, even if he paints the forbidden. These letters remind us that behind every work of art stands a human being wrestling with the same contradictions we all feel. For some artists, erotic art was an act of defiance, a way to push back against the strictures of church and state. For others, it was a simple, if risky, way to earn a living. And for a few, it was a reflection of their own deepest desires. An unsigned sketch tucked in the pages of a 17th-century sketchbook shows a woman, her hair unbound, gazing back at the viewer with an expression equal parts challenge and invitation. The intimacy of her gaze feels almost modern, as if she might step off the page at any moment to tell her story. We can only imagine the artist's heartbeat as he captured that expression, the thrill of risking everything to bring his private vision to life. One of the most moving discoveries in the museum's collection is a small, fragile painting of two hands, intertwined, no faces, no bodies, just hands. The brushwork is delicate, almost reverent. It's a reminder that erotic art is not always about explicitness. Sometimes it is about connection, about the simple yet profound touch between two people who dared to reach for each other in a world that often demanded they stay apart. As we walk through these silent galleries tonight, let's honor the artists who risked scandal and censure to record the private longings of their time. Let's remember that art is more than pigment, and canvas it is the language of the human heart, a record of all the things we dared to dream but were too afraid to say. So tonight, in the hush of the museum's hidden halls, let's reach out our hands toward understanding, toward compassion, and toward the hidden truths that unite us across centuries. Beyond the grand galleries of the Rijksmuseum and the carefully curated labels lies another layer of history, secret archive of objects and stories that were never meant to see the light of day. These are the artifacts that, for centuries, lived in the shadows. Erotic sketches hastily tucked between pages of ledgers, small tokens of forbidden pleasure hidden in the back rooms of merchants' houses, and the quiet remnants of a society that didn't always want to admit its own contradictions. Tonight, let's step into these hidden corners and discover the lost tales of erotic art that escaped the censors and found a place, however quietly, in the Rijksmuseum's hidden vaults. In the decades following Amsterdam's Golden Age, moral authorities grew bolder in their efforts to police public decency. City ordinances were passed, prohibiting obscene images and the distribution of indecent books. Printmakers and artists adapted by hiding their more explicit works behind innocuous covers, sometimes literally, binding them in books labeled household accounts or travel diaries to fool any inquisitive eyes. The museum's archives still contain some of these clever disguises. A slim ledger that, at first glance, records grain shipments, but, with a deft flick of the page, reveals an etching of a reclining Venus, a playful satyr peeking through the leaves. It's a delightful reminder of the creativity that artists and their patrons employed to defy the censors. In one particularly intriguing case, a curator unearthed a small wooden box containing what at first appeared to be a set of spice spoons. Tucked beneath them was a folded parchment, its edges browned with age. Unfolding it revealed a series of delicate ink drawing-snaked figures entwined in intricate poses. The style matched that of a known Amsterdam workshop that specialized in both religious engravings and risque commissions. Historians still argue, one researcher wrote in her field notes, whether these drawings were intended as private amusements or as studies for a more daring painting now lost. That mystery lingers in the air, like a candle flickering in a darkened room. But perhaps the most remarkable survival story belongs to a small collection of condoms, carefully rolled in tissue paper and hidden inside the false bottom of a merchant's traveling trunk. These fragile relics, marked with faint initials, speak to the deeply human desire to protect, to control, and to explore pleasure, even in a world that frowned upon such freedoms. Their presence in the Rijksmuseum's collection is both a testament to the resourcefulness of individuals in history and a challenge to our own assumptions about the past. After all, what we call taboo often says more about us than about the people who lived before us. Scholars who study these artifacts often remark on the tension between preservation and revelation. Should these private items remain hidden, respecting the secrecy in which they were created and cherished? Or should they be displayed, offering modern visitors a glimpse into the real complicated lives of those who came before? The museum itself has wrestled with this question, sometimes choosing to exhibit these items only in special exhibitions with clear warnings, sometimes leaving them to rest in archival boxes, marked with small notes that read simply, "Restricted." For visitors who stumble upon these objects, the experience can be transformative. One guestbook entry reads, "I never thought a museum could feel so alive." Another, "It's like peeking into someone's diary a secret no one else was supposed to see." Those reactions reveal the power of these hidden histories to connect us across time, to remind us that desire, curiosity, and the urge to challenge boundaries are not modern inventions, but threads woven through every generation. As we leave this hidden archive tonight, let's remember that every secret holds a story, sometimes scandalous, sometimes tender, always human. And let's carry with us the understanding that the past is not just what we see on the walls, but also what lies behind them, waiting to be discovered. If there's one thing this journey through the Rijksmuseum's hidden erotic treasures has taught us, it's that the line between taboo and enlightenment is always shifting. Objects that once scandalized polite society now sit quietly behind glass, inviting us to question what we think we know about history, about ourselves. Tonight, let's draw together the threads of this story and explore how erotic art, condoms, and human curiosity came together to spark fresh insights and challenge old assumptions in the museum's late stand, perhaps most daring exhibition. In a small, discreet gallery at the Rijksmuseum, curators finally decided to bring these secret histories into the light. Not with fanfare or sensational headlines, but with a quiet confidence that every piece, no matter how controversial, deserves a place in the tapestry of Dutch culture. They designed the exhibit as a winding path, a journey through the Golden Age's complex relationship with desire, disease, and the human body. Visitors enter through a modest archway greeted by a simple sign, "Intimate Histories." It's an invitation to leave judgment at the door. The exhibit begins with small etchings and sketches innocuous at first glance, but loaded with double meanings. A woman's hand rests on a table, fingers lightly curled, a gesture that, in certain circles, suggested invitation. Nearby, a delicate print shows Venus stepping from the sea, her gaze defiant rather than demure. Curators placed these early pieces alongside historical notes that explain the social codes of the time, how images like these blurred the line between art and private amusement. Further along, the exhibit unfolds into a darker alcove where the infamous condoms await. Fragile, yellowed by time, they rest on velvet cushions like precious artifacts. A small label explains their purpose in the fight against disease, a reminder that even in the Golden Age, people sought to protect themselves from the dangers that came with pleasure. Historians still argue, the label adds, whether these condoms were more about self-preservation or about defying the moral order of the day. The tension is palpable. Visitors linger, reading, whispering, sometimes laughing nervously. But perhaps The most moving part of the exhibit is the final room, a simple space, its walls painted in soft gray, where a single painting hangs. It's that delicate image of two hands intertwined, no faces, no bodies, just the quiet intimacy of touch. Beneath it, a quote from a 17th-century letter reads, "In the darkness of the night, we are all the same longing to be seen, to be known." This gentle reminder brings the entire exhibit into focus. Beyond the scandal and the curiosity, these works are about connection. They are about the human need to be understood. Visitors leave the exhibit changed. Some smile, grateful for the chance to see history through a new lens. Others walk away thoughtful, perhaps even uneasy. A few write notes in the guest book. "I never knew history could feel so alive," one reads. Another simply says, "I see myself in these stories." That, the curators agree, is the ultimate goal, not to shock or titillate, but to spark empathy, to bridge the gap between past and present, between the lives of others and our own. As the night deepens and the museum's halls empty, the last echoes of visitors' footsteps fade away. The artifacts, fragile yet resilient, rest once more in their cases. They wait patiently for the next curious mind to come searching proof that even the most private stories can become part of our shared human heritage. So tonight, let's take this final step together. Let's embrace the mystery and the wonder, the questions that remain unanswered. Let's leave this museum behind with a deeper understanding that every desire, every curiosity, every taboo is part of what makes us human, and that perhaps is the most beautiful art of all. As the night grows still and the city's lights begin to dim, let your breath slow and your mind drift. The echoes of the Rijksmuseum's hidden stories linger like a soft glow in the darkness, their gentle warmth wrapping around your thoughts. These tales of art, passion, and forbidden longings remind us that history is not just a collection of dates and names, but a living tapestry of human hearts beating with the same curiosity and wonder that you feel now. Imagine yourself wandering through the museum's quiet halls, your footsteps muffled by time, the air heavy with the scent of old books and oil paint. In the hush of that moment, you are both visitor and participanta, silent witness to centuries of whispered secrets and quiet rebellion. Let these stories settle into your dreams tonight, weaving themselves into the fabric of your own imagination. And now, as the final notes of this journey fade into silence, I wish you gentle dreams, dear listener. May you find peace in the night's embrace, and may tomorrow bring new wonders to discover. Good night.